It is around the early 19th century in the United States. Slavery has been around in America since 1619, when a Dutch ship called the Treasurer sailed through Chesapeake Bay up to the James River to a settlement known as Jamestown. It carried a ship filled with slaves. Having slaves to do your work was convenient. It was easy going for the Caucasians, but the slaves were never asked because they couldn't understand what they were saying. Every year, thousands and thousands of slaves were brought from Africa to come to America to be slaves for life. In the southern states, slavery is very popular compared to the north. It was thought that bringing people who spoke a different language and had a different culture could adapt to American customs and the English language as well as Catholicism. Soon it turned from something based on money into something based on race. Originally, the North stopped using slaves because it did not work within their communities, but when it came to helping runaways and during the Civil War, they were for the slaves. Women, men, and children were forced to work on plantations of farming crops, working in houses, and being servants. Every day, they were forced to do the same backbreaking work over and over for the rest of their lives. If you were to try and talk back to your owner, you could have the chance of getting whipped, slapped, shot, or if you were a woman, even raped.
This whole process would not be possible if it weren't for the abolitionists involved. Some of the main abolitionists were Harriet Tubman, Isaac Hopper, Frederick Douglass, John Brown, William Still, and many others. Many conductors in the Underground Railroad would put up quilts which had secret meanings for runaway slaves. Another main advocate was Abraham Lincoln. His main phrase was, "Whenever I hear anyone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried on him." As the president, he had a larger advantage and tried to spread freedom throughout the United States. William Lloyd Garrison was another person who helped change the views on slaves. He would write newspapers every day trying to spread the words of freedom. In one of his papers, he said, "I am determined to lift up the standard of freedom in the eyes of the nation. Within sight of Bunker Hill and in the birthplace of liberty, my standard is now unfurled, and long may it flow till every bondman be set free." Other people were also a main part of the emancipation of slaves, people such as Theodore Parker, who was also referred to as the Great American Preacher. He preached many sermons and advocated for many knights. Parker also put up signs for the slaves. One read, "Caution, colored people of Boston, kidnappers and slave catchers, people of Boston, rally to freedom." With all the cruelty and pain these slaves were going through, the abolitionists decided to come together and try to save these poor innocent people who were brought to America against their will. Then the Underground Railroad was born.
Abolitionists set up safe houses, routes, and had what they called conductors working to lead the slaves into free states. Slaves would sneak out at night to certain designated areas where someone would come to get them and bring them to only a small part of their very long journey. Slaves would be brought through the woods by the North Star, which helped keep an eye on steps, as well as keeping a vast eye out for tree moss, which indicated their north and south poles, since moss only grows on the north side of trees. They would also be brought into secret compartments and houses until dawn set out again. Conductors would take slaves among boats, tell them to keep quiet, stay down, and deliver them to more conductors until they were free. Some were so exhausted from their journeys that they would kill themselves just to end their suffering. Their journeys took hours upon days. Sometimes there was so much ground they needed to cover in such little amount of time that they had to run through the broad daylight just to get out of their circumstance. Eventually the process became more fluid, and more slaves, increased by the thousands, were being freed from their treacherous pasts, and being able to live in the America everyone else was allowed to love. Our topic, the Underground Railroad, really relates to this year's National History Day theme, Breaking Barriers, because it truly shows the immense pressure and painstaking circumstances the slaves had to face. Slaves had to take long journeys through the entire United States, just to gain the natural human rights that only decades earlier, founding fathers and colonists longed for.
When that Pharaoh chariot comes, I'm gonna leave you. I'm bound for the promised land. I'm gonna leave you. I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave you. Farewell, oh farewell. But I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, oh farewell. I'll meet you in the morning. I'm bound bound for the promised land. On the other side of Jordan, bound for the promised land. I'm sorry I'm gonna leave you. Farewell, oh farewell, but I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, oh farewell, oh, I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, oh farewell, oh, I'll meet you in the morning.